Thank you for hanging out with us on Saturday. It is 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and we have a hot topic today, and we're going to share some information, records, and resources. First, I want to go through just a few slides about the Center for Family History with IAAM, and then I'll introduce who's here. And I do want to say, before I get to the panel, that we have Darius Brown joining us. He will be monitoring the chat and for your questions, and I'll repeat this again, you want to put that in the Q&A box. And also know that we are streaming into the museum in the Center for Family History's conference room. So we will probably have a few attendees tuning in from there. And if there's questions, we'll also be able to entertain them. All right, so let's get going. Again, this is part of our 2024 Black History Month series. Today's topic is African American women's role in the Civil War. So I always start off with a little bit of Charleston trivia. So those of you that have been here on Saturdays with us, I know you can answer these questions, but anyone that's tuning in is brand new, let's talk about this. What is the size of a football field and a half? What is located at Gadsden's Wharf? And all the genealogists, right now you're Googling Gadsden's Wharf, Charleston, find out more. But what has 9 galleries? Who has a Center for Family History that will provide educational programs for visitors, young and old? Who has membership opportunities? All of these answers can be found at the main website of https://iaamuseum.org, and for events, just add events on there as well. And those answers you can throw into the chat room if you'd like, or share with, if you're in the conference room, share with the folks that are there, because might be that you've seen those galleries and things. So here's a little bit about the Center for Family History at the International African American Museum, which is located in Charleston. And right now, I have the drop-down menu there. So you've got the Resource Center, you got digital archives, and you can contribute things to the website. A few reminders during this session. It is being recorded. It will be available at a later date on the YouTube channel for the IAAM Museum, and you'll see it for Center for Family History. Please keep yourself muted and turn off your video during the presentation or the discussion. Closed caption is available for whoever wants it. And again, if you have questions, please place them in the Q&A box, and those questions will be responded to after the panel discussion. So I want to welcome our guests, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but we have True Lewis, and you can see she's the genealogist, co-host of Black Pro Gen, a veteran, and then there is her blog. Joyceann Gray, also genealogist, veteran, and author, and there's her blog as well. Angela Walton-Raji, genealogist and author, and I'm sharing her blog as well. So welcome, ladies, and I'm going to go to Joyceann. You're at the top, so go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll pass it on to True and then Angela.
I guess I should have been prepared for.
You're prepared.
This
is informal, but we welcome the open discussion. So just what are you working on?
Well, right now
what have you authored?
Yeah, I've authored Yes, We Remember, which is about my family. And I've been really fortunate and blessed that with that book. I found a lot of things from newspaper articles, and there was a lot of documentation through the years about my people. So I was able to put the story together.
Mhm.
Then I wrote a whimsical little book about what would it be like to have a tea time with all the women from yesteryear coming together, regardless of what year it was. It could be the 1700s, the 1800s, 1900s, sitting around a table on a really snowy, windy day um, in Nebraska. And what could they have told or said? Um, because most of what we hear about and from is from men, their stories.
Mhm.
Okay. So what
Mhm.
could these women, and it was just a little whimsical book. Then I got serious again and I started studying about um uh the homesteaders in Nebraska. And so I put together proofing the claim. And that's a book about all the homesteaders from Black homesteaders in Nebraska. And come to find out there were a bunch of them. And
And that would be homesteaders of the Homestead Act of 1862, correct?
correct. And
Okay,
some even before that. Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
Love it.
So
Okay.
because a lot of one strand or
Mm-hmm.
one strand of my family actually um, from slavery went straight into Canada and then developed a
Mm-hmm.
whole branch of my family and then brought them back into the United States um, and settled in Nebraska
And
and actually did the excuse
I'm
me.
gonna make a statement. Excuse me
Sure.
on that. Yes, there were Black people in Nebraska. And I am saying that because doing this type of work, people might not realize they're that far west.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
per
Oh,
se.
even further than that, they
Yes,
Black
yes,
people went all the way to California, um,
yes, yes.
and Wyoming and
Mhm.
um,
And
they
we're
were
not
up in
talking about
Oregon, and
1900 either.
they were in Oregon before actually they were in Oregon before the gold rush.
Yes, that's
So
awesome.
the
Okay.
so I put together that book. Um,
Okay.
I'm sorry, her name escapes me, but she did one of Black homesteaders of the South.
Bernice Bennett.
Bernice. Okay, so Bernice did hers of the South. I did mine of Nebraska, and then some of my articles were published in the um help me,
The OGS, the Afro American, or are you talking about the National Park Service?
the National Park.
Okay.
On on their website. You gotta keep
Okay.
up cousin. Then we found
Oh
out
yes,
that
we are
we
distantly related. These folks on here are my family. So I'm
yes,
going to pass it
and then come
on
to
to
find out
True Ann.
how Shelley and I are related,
Yes, we
and then
found each
if
other.
you know Khadija Mateen, that's my
She
younger
used,
sister.
yes.
So
And she
it's
used to be she used to be
the
OGS,
national,
Afro-American Historical Genealogical Society national president.
right.
And that is how we connected. So
That's
I'm
right,
going to pass
exactly.
this on to True right now. True, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And I know about Granddaddy Ike.
Yes, you do. Good afternoon, everyone. And I do want to thank the International African American Museum for, giving me grace to be here today. I am True Lewis, and I am from Fort Knox, Kentucky here. And I write about my grandfather. He's my second great grandfather, Ike Ivory. And he had three wives and 23 children. So my main focus since 1998 has been on him and his entire lineage, his wife's parents and his own parents as well. And I dabble a little bit, maybe about 7 years ago in Pennsylvania, records
Mhm.
because I am a daughter of the American Revolution. So I'm quite busy right now as national vice chair. I'm a writer for their national podcast right now. So that takes quite a bit of my time right now for the next 3 years is what I've been appointed for. So I do a lot on my blog. So if you want to go there, I have so many stories. My documentary is about 10 years old that I have my elders, and I actually went to my ancestral home location in Bullitt County, Alabama, because that's where my primary research is at. And
If you'll put that link to your site, even though I had it on, on a slide, you guys are welcome to put things in the chat because people can save the chat if you want them to come to your blogs and things.
okay. And I guess lastly, I will say for about 6 years with over 100 episodes, I was honored to be Nika Smith's co-host for Black Pro Gen. So I'm just
Yes.
be here and thank you.
Yes. All right. Angela Walton-Raji. You're on mute, dear.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Shelley, for inviting me. And of course, thank the museum once again, and to just be here with such lovely ladies as well. And I'm often busy when it comes to my research. And Civil War was an area I never expected to get into it, but somehow some of the Civil War ancestors, I think they picked me. I was minding my business, and then here comes Uncle Cephas, and the rest is history. But then I had some other things that caught my attention as well. Now, Uncle Cephas was my great-grandfather's brother, but I also have a great-great-grandfather on my maternal side who was a Civil War soldier. And from Uncle Cephas's family, he didn't enlist alone. He enlisted with another brother, another great-great-uncle, and his two sons. So I'm all of a sudden, I'm just ranking up all of these Civil War ancestors, and then two cousins joined them as well. So, I'm a daughter of the Civil War, I'll put it that way. But I'm just excited about today's topic, looking at women and something, again, I think of war, I think of military, I think of combat, I think of battles, and I think of men. And there were men. But then I ran across something I didn't expect to find, but I'll talk about that later.
You're going to share that information. Yeah. And I would like to say one other thing. You're also an author, just like Joyceann, and you recently had a book and people could see it right behind you if you will read off the name of that and share that information.
It is Oklahoma Freedmen of the Five Tribes. The five tribes being those 5 nations that were forced off of their lands in the Southeast on the Trail of Tears and taken to Indian Territory, west of the Mississippi and west of Arkansas. And but many people do not know that they took enslaved Black people with them, not as, oh, come with me, my brother, we're going to save you. No, our ancestors arrived as human chattel, as property enslaved by the 5 tribes, which are Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Muskogee Creek, and Seminole nations. And my ancestors on my paternal side were Choctaw freedmen. And of course, I've been writing about them for about 32 years as well. So that is one of my passions as well. So thank you for.
And we'll be looking forward to more discussion on that on another webinar. And also all of you are on Facebook and belong to groups. So for the audience, just, welcome to reach out. You'll see the Choctaw Freedmen. You're going to see My True Roots out there. You're going to see Joyceann Gray and so forth. So again, I ask that you support our efforts here and sharing information. So I'm going to start off questions.
Hey, Sandy.
I'm sorry.
I want to interrupt you right quick and just interject that the Charlestown researchers. Don't forget
Oh,
us.
yes, forgot about them. Charlestown, West Virginia researchers is another group that have been together several years now. I don't even know if I can tell you what year, but this is a connection I think is worth sharing. And thank you for that, Joyceann. But there are several of us that had a common research area. Some of us had ancestors that were free, and some of us had ancestors that were enslaved. We found each other per se, but we also connected with descendants of the enslaver, all in Jefferson County, West Virginia. So we have all come together. There's articles you can find on Google and things that from the newspaper. And I will say that some of the enslavers all revolved. If you know anything about Jefferson County, it was Virginia, but now West Virginia all kind of connect with the GW family, as in George Washington family, because as you know, they all, his brothers and them, had enslaved folks as well. And that's all up in the little hook of what's West Virginia right now. So thank you for that. And that county, everybody might not know it as Jefferson County, but you do know about Harper's Ferry and you have heard of John Brown. That is Jefferson County, now West Virginia. So I'm going to come through questions and I'm going to ask each of you, and I'll start with Joyceann. And if you guys could kind of give brief, and because if you had any slides, that's fine. If not, I know Angela has documents and things to share that will be for all of us to view. And also you can Google the topic that Angela's talking about there. You can see it on YouTube, which is just focused a little differently than what we'll talk about, but it's part of it. So the first question I have, would enjoy saying, and again, all of you just give us some brief answers to this so we can roll through here. But I want to know, could you provide like the roles that you're aware of as a researcher that African-American women played during the Civil War, especially where you might have heard of them being maybe in a support role, and then they became maybe an active in something that was going on during the Civil War. And it's okay if you don't, just ask questions amongst each other as well, because this is learning, this is sharing. So Joyceann, do you have any comment on that question? And then
Yes. How many minutes? Because I did a
I'm
short
gonna give you 1 or 2 minutes, and then we go pass it. I'm gonna give True 1 or 2
Okay.
minutes, and I'm
All
gonna
right,
give
that's
Angela
great.
1 or 2 minutes.
Okay, as far as what I have researched, and I was excited to find out that my family participated in this. Back in 1863, during the Civil War, Black women were active spies and scouts for the Union soldiers and supporters and protectors of the well-being of many Northern Union soldiers, especially Black women. With the Civil War, the greatest source of military and naval intelligence, particularly on the tactical level for the federal government during the war, was the Negro. And it was these women that the arrogance of the white Confederate folks didn't see us. We served them, but they didn't see us. So they talked freely during dinner or lunch or walking the halls, or as we are taking them from point A to point B. And so that conversation was repeated and sent north. So Cathay Williams is an American hero. There were over 400 women that served in the Civil War, posing as male soldiers. Williams was the first African-American woman to enlist and the only documented woman to serve in the United States Army while disguised as a man during the Indian Wars. I'm going to jump back and say finally that the war was not only about shooting a gun. It was working in the kitchen, driving trucks, distributing supplies, where all crucial functions, even though they weren't on the front lines. It's a shame that we are not recognized in our literature and our history books, and in school. Even Tom Hanks just mentioned about how come I didn't hear about this,
Yes.
you know. So we were very much a part of the backbone of the successful endeavors of the Union Army during the Civil War. That's my minute.
And now people will know because we are having
And
this
now people will
discussion.
know. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that. True Ann?
I mean, Joyce said it all there, especially about Cathay Williams.
Yeah.
Always been a mentor to me, you know, in my generation when I served during the Clinton administration in the 90s. So that's how I first learned about her and really a lot about the Civil War, because we didn't really learn about that in school. But I think the whole overview of it, you know, the women is in the home, you know, they're doing their family aid, whether they were enslaved or, you know, free. And then they come into this era of this, they have to leave the home to do the war things as, you know, as a society as a whole, the midwifery thing. So I've seen how it's evolved for, you know, the Black woman up until today. So it's always this thing with me about their proper place, and you know, we jump forward to what we see today. But back then, that was a lot going on. I always try to place myself in their shoes in a sense too. So yeah,
Excellent.
the
Great.
farming of the house, you know, the businesses that they had to do secretly. So it's a lot of duties and responsibilities during that time frame for these women.
And I want to also, if I didn't say it at the beginning, I do want to acknowledge that you and Joyceann have served your country, this country, and served it very well. And I will give the thank yous to you for that, because I know both of you are veterans of the U.S. military. And I believe both Army, if I remember correctly. So
Yeah,
now
I'm retired Army. Yeah.
retired Army, yes. And so I'm going to pass it on to Angela. What is your insight on this?
Well, it's very interesting because I appreciate what True just said in terms of the role of women in the home. And I have often thought that, you know, that was the only thing that happened, that we were there if our men came home, you know, wounded or whatever, battle weary, and there was the good wife. And the good wife was there. But I also learned about the names, the famous women who were had a role of some sort during the war. We know Harriet Tubman. We know the role that she played, but we don't know that there were other women who also served as spies. And many people are not aware that Harriet was also a nurse in the Civil War. I learned that Sojourner Truth was a nurse and served at one of the military hospitals in the Civil War in Washington, D.C. And of course, a colleague who was in the Baltimore chapter years ago, well, no, I met him at actually the National Archives in Washington, D.C. And I think he came to one or two meetings in Baltimore. This was back in the 1990s. And maybe the topic of Civil War and, you know, yes, Harriet Tubman, she had done this. And I remember later he asked me, well, you do know about Susie King Taylor, don't you? And I'm like, Susie King who? And no, I don't. You don't know about her? Well, I had a lesson that was coming to me. So I got a chance to learn about this woman who not only traveled with her husband's regiment as a nurse, when the regiment moved, she moved with them. And what is it that people say? She took notes and was taking names. Well, she left her own book, her memoir, and one can learn so much from her. So when I first saw that and learned about Susie King Taylor. I also learned about the 33rd U.S. Colored Infantry, which is one of my favorites. I have my favorites that I look at and that I research, but this one in particular, because I learned about how successful they were at the skirmish at Pocatalico Bridge. And but there was Susie who stood out. I didn't know that Susie was not the only one either. And so I have just
That's
had my eyes opened. And not only were there nurses, they served in other roles as well. So it's just been a joy for me to fall into this topic that chose me. Maybe I'll still say thank you, Uncle Cephas, wherever you are, because he got me interested in really reading the history of the regiments and getting interested in the people. And then I found another group of people, the other gender of which I'm a part. I found women who did some amazing things. So it's been a tremendous journey for me.
And I will comment because she is referenced Uncle Cephas and twice. And I'm not gonna tell the whole story, but at a family reunion, there was discussion going on that she attended, and somebody said Uncle Cephas had killed a white man, and that set off all the research. And he was USCT and went in the service with his sons. But another day, another time, and that the first time. I think that was 2006 or 9 or
way back there. Yes. Oh my gosh.
The story of Uncle Cephas. Now Uncle Cephas has a whole bunch of nieces all across the
All
country
around the country.
about killing this white man, and I'll say the last thing and go to the next question, and escaping from Nathan Bedford. So y'all, that's a story to tune into. So I'll let you go there. And let me go to the next question. And this is really of an interest for the audience as well. What are some of the significant barriers and challenges African-American women face during the military during this period? And I'm going to say of the Civil War. So Joyceann, I'll throw it to you first, and then go to True and Angela.
Okay, what I found was I can be very short on this one. The challenges were being recognized, just as I mentioned earlier, as being a slave and not being even seen in the military. It was a lot of the same thing. We had discrimination, sexual harassment. Someone asked me after I retired, could I write about times in the military? And I said, you know, if I spend all my time to write out the sexual harassment or just harassment from senior soldiers, fellow soldiers, I'd be in the office all the time and I never get my job done. So those were some of the major issues. Not only were you a woman, so you were discounted, you were a Black woman, so you're totally discounted. So it was perseverance is the secret to success, but sometimes some of us got to get further along and had maybe more of a constitution than some of us others. That's what I see from Civil War to present. I have a granddaughter who's getting ready to become an officer at the Air Force, and I felt it was my duty to sit down and talk to her and let her know some things that she needed to be aware of, and kind of fortify her so that when she goes in, she can stay focused on what her goal is. So that's the biggest thing is you know, every step of the way. I even had, and then I had family, friends. You know, you go home on leave and you're so excited to tell and share and tell your folks what you've been doing, and they're excited to see you for about 5 minutes, and then they go on, you know, and you within a week you're ready to go back
Yeah.
because nobody understands your conversation any longer.
Mhm.
You have a different conversation, you know, and then there are people who are jealous or envious of you because you've gotten away.
Traveled.
Okay, so those are
So
those
keep
are constant.
on that. Mhm.
Those are constant issues even today.
Yes.
So
True,
that's
Ann?
my 2 cents.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I had to think about that for a minute. And I do agree with Miss Joyce about the physical and the domestic violence and the mental challenges, even for today that stood back then, I think for the women of that time. Things come up to me about their safety, hygiene, them being forward thinking, because you always have to remember about this environment that these Black women are in under these slave owners, these white women, you know, as wives back then. And I just think about, you know, the challenges of them being with those women of the head of the household while their men are away, and how they kind of have to let go of those things that were reinforced to them about their place. You know, it goes back again always for me about their proper place in this during this time period. So these women had to work together, even though, you know, because they had to do it to survive. And they're here on these plantations and whatnot, and even probably the free women. How was the dynamic between them and the enslaved and the white woman, you know, during this time? The mobility of all of this, them being able to move around. And I guess that goes in my mind too about safety. And I think all of this still comes back to today. And I'll always reference back to when I was in the 90s about the barriers and the challenges. And even though we're here in the 19th and the 20th, 21st century, those things still apply, like Miss Joyce said. We're always worried about our safety. We have to work twice as hard. I had good examples because from my basic training to my advanced individual training to when I got to my duty stations, I had Black officer females in charge of me. I saw the Black, you know, enlisted, the upper enlisted over me. I got to experience all of that and see it. Because before I went in the Army, I didn't see educated Black, you know, officers that were educated through HBCU or Ivy League schools. I wasn't around that. All my teachers were white. I had two Black teachers in the school district, but I didn't have them. But those barriers back then, I think the thing that worried me the most was their safety and hygiene and the physical and the mental challenges and the violence. So,
So
yeah.
yeah, so thinking of this, both of you are bringing out some really significant things that we typically are not thinking about until after we read something. So you're bringing up safety, and Joyceann commented about the sexism, the racism, and things. And yes, all of that still goes on today. So us as a researcher, and I'm changing this a little bit around to you, Angela, because we're hearing this, you know, you called out some significant names everybody shared. You know, Harriet Tubman's probably the most well-known that we know. Plus, we've had a couple movies, you know, and things like that. We have a new book that's coming out, and I hope Darius will type the name of the new book that's coming out about Harriet Tubman and the Combahee raid and things. And that's, I think, coming out in April. I'm not sure, but I'll let him, if he will post that link. I have it pre-ordered. But I want to go back to some of these things about the barriers and the challenges. Angela, how does that relate to how we try to find information about them? Because they're experiencing the challenges and barriers, is that preventing us to find, like the findings you found at National Archives, and things like that? So what are they? How do we combat that? And
Well, yeah.
going on that theme, if that makes sense.
It's an interesting question in terms of the barriers, but I think we have to turn back the clock a little bit and look at what was going on. And keep in mind that the United States has not witnessed war on American soil since the Civil War. So there's not one human being alive who even has any idea of not just the physical havoc in the lives of individuals, even on the landscape, the total destruction. We don't know what that means. To us, war is something in a foreign country. In the 20th and the 21st century, it's still over there. If you can recall the situation after Hurricane Katrina, and look how folks were so upset when somebody in the press referred to people seeking refuge from the floods and called them refugees. Refugees, they're not foreign because we only see the word refugees over there. Yes. But we had refugees here. And if you are running from chaos or something very traumatic, like the point when the levees broke in New Orleans, you are seeking refuge in higher ground. But because everybody was conditioned. Refugees, foreign country. Refugees, Afghanistan. Refugees, Vietnam.
And we know about the freedmen, Vera, who the refugees are in.
Of refugees, freedmen, and abandoned lands. But in the Civil War, because no one is alive who's ever seen what war looks like, we also don't see how the trajectory of the lives of people were changed. And war affects every social class where war occurs. It affected whites as well as Blacks. And when it comes to women, the trajectory of the lives of women, white and Black, was dramatically altered. White women.
Oh, she froze.
Hey, Shelley, I think we need to interject Pearl Harbor and the Twin
you
Towers,
froze a bit, Angela.
I'm sorry?
You froze a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. It must be my signal issues here. Sorry. In the sense that women became part of a profession that was in its infancy, a profession that we think of now as dominated by women, nursing.
Yes.
Before that time, Civil War and pre-Civil War, early 19th century, nurses were men.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you had a few women who went to Congress and petitioned, we want to help with the war effort. And what was the perception for white women? Oh, well, y'all are too frail. You really can't lift any heavy men who've been wounded, and you're too delicate. You're going to be horrified by war. Now, on the other hand, the opposite end of that, Black women had been living through the horrors of slavery for generations. But the trajectory of their lives changed because for the first time, they always worked. They worked in the home, out in the fields. We always worked, but for the first time, for pay. And this is when the trajectory of Black women as wage earners occurred during the Civil War as an entire social class of people. All of a sudden, people were showing up and showing up at the encampments of Union soldiers and were called contrabands of war. But some of them went to work. They went to work and started cooking. And some of them, we can help prepare, we can sew, we can make aprons, we can help prepare things with those tents, we can roll bandages, we can do a lot. But the first time for generations, they were being paid. So I would say, add to that, though, the dangers. They're now working around white men. Just because they're working for Union soldiers didn't mean those soldiers cared for them. So they were in danger in terms of safety as well. And some were closer to the lines than people might think. And I'll just stop there. So anyway.
Shan, you wanted to say something when she froze?
She's muted.
Yeah, I mentioned about, we did have an inkling of what it would be like. And I stressed the word inkling. We had Pearl Harbor,
Mm,
and we had the Twin Towers. Now I lost a niece. She was 43 years old when she passed, but she suffered for 5 years because of coming home and knocking on her mother's door, and her mother didn't even recognize her because she had so much ash all over her.
mm.
So we have friends that walked from, because I'm from New York, so we had friends that walked across the bridge because there was no transportation, and there was so much chaos and devastation. So, and that in itself did create change in certain areas as well. But I applaud you on what you did speak about, and I'm honored to be here with you guys. That's all I got to say.
No, we're making great points, but I also want to make sure we drive to the point of information and records. And so we've shared names. We know there was issues with women, number one, because of their gender, number one. And then, as you all have basically alluded to, then the color of their skin is a whole nother thing. And we're talking about Civil War time. So you got free and you got enslaved. So there's a whole nother box to unfold in trying to understand that how women that could have been a service, and then when that war was over, you're either going to be a slave or you're going to be free. And again, I'm saying when the war is over, and I still kept the word slave. Because if you look at some of the records, you'll still see, I'm going to say, even though they're free, the enslavement and control of the people after the war. And so, records, resources. I'm going to have Angela, if you'll share a few slides, and then we'll go back and ask a couple more questions, but share something about the records and resources. And you guys, you acknowledge nurses. And what about these nurses? And typically, like you said, might be, men first. And I'm seeing the first thing, a pension process. Now, I heard you say the women earned wages, and these are some Black women, the nurses. So go ahead and share a few slides for us.
Well, one of the things, and I will watch the time, I know it's passing quickly. One of the things that, of course, if you research any aspect of 19th and 18th century military history. Of course, there are records galore. And obviously, as a person who researches Civil War, I love pension files, Civil War pension files. And one of my regiments that I like to research is the 57th U.S. Colored Infantry, a regiment out of my home state, Arkansas. And I was just set a project for myself at the National Archives. I wanted to document the names of every soldier in the 57th U.S. Colored who had filed a pension. So I was going through just writing names just on my little legal pad. And right in the middle of the alphabet, letter M, I ended up finding something that really surprised me. And I'm hoping this is going to change. Now, of course, I will point out that the pension process was something that was difficult for women anyway, for widows, if their husband was a soldier in the Civil War. She had to prove that he was my husband and we were really married to each other. And especially Black women, many of whom had a husband, but they had no legal record of their marriage, of their relationship. So that was difficult of anyone. But then there were other women. And so I was merrily going along my way, and I found this record, Benjamin Moore, and there was a note at the bottom. The wife of the soldier has applied as nurse, U.S. Volunteers, and it gives the numbers behind it. I'm like, wait a minute, she's applied for a pension? Also, this is a pension index card. So I had to go and talk to the military archivist at NARA and ask information. I found her name because her name doesn't appear here. It just says the wife of the soldier. And I'm like, well, who is she? What's her name? Her name was Clara. And I've also recently, I have to thank Nika Smith, who pulled this file for me, a woman from my part of the country in Oklahoma, coming from the Cherokee Nation, Dorcas Buffington. And this lady keeps popping up in front of my eyes a lot since I've heard of her name. She was also a nurse, as you can see, the medical department, U.S. Volunteers. She applied for and received her pension. But then I learned where these women served on the USS Red Rover, a floating Civil War Union hospital. It was originally built as a Confederate ship, and it was captured by Union soldiers and converted to a Union floating hospital. And I found some of the information about some of the women who served there. There were a lot of white women. There were some nuns who were there, but I also found the names of 5 Black women who also served on the USS Red Rover: Ellen Campbell, Alice Kinney, Sarah Keno, Betsy Young, and Bradford Stokes. And that was really just the beginning of what I was to learn. I learned that there are a few images, not just of nurses, but of women who served as cooks, as laundresses, and the list just goes on and on. Most of them did not leave diaries and letters, but Charlotte Fortin, a woman who was a nurse to the 54th Massachusetts, you know, the regiment in the movie Glory, she was also a nurse to that unit as well. And she left diaries of things that were happening, things that she witnessed. And so you can even see there was a wonderful exhibit about African Americans who were involved in the medical effort in the Civil War. It was called Binding Wounds, Pushing Boundaries. And this is an image from that particular exhibit. There's Rhoda Ray, Springfield, Missouri. She was enslaved in Missouri, and during the Battle of Wilson's Creek, she and her family sought refuge at the Union line, and she returned to the hospital and she tended wounded soldiers as well. She remained in Missouri and died there in 1898. I mentioned Anne Bradford Stokes, who worked at the U.S. Navy Hospital. She was born in Rutherford County, Tennessee. She was hired as, she came as a contraband, but then she was hired officially and was paid as a first-class boy. That was the pay grade that she received.
And also the sexism in some point, just in the labeling.
You hit the nail on the head right there. And of course, she lived in Illinois after the war. She filed for her own pension, but it was denied. She fought for it, and she was later given her pension.
Awesome.
And there's so much more. But then there's another record group. Oh my gosh, Record Group 94. Now, if you research Civil War, everybody's familiar with the service records.
Mhm.
Well, guess what? 12 boxes of service records of women, Black, white, it didn't matter. If they served as a nurse, as a matron, sort of the supervisor of the nurses, as a laundress, as a cook, they have service records. And look at this. This is a document on the website of the National Archives, list of female nurses, cooks, and laundresses employed in Army hospitals during the war. This is on the NARA website, and it is fully digitized and in color. And the pages are amazing, and you can see those little thumbnails at the bottom. That's the ledger at the top. And it's in alpha order by city. Okay, so you'll see Albany, New York, but then Alexandria, Virginia, then Algiers, Louisiana, and so on, and Annapolis, Maryland, and so on, where some of these hospitals were. And you see the names of many of the hospitals. There were some that just were called U.S. Hospital number 15 or 19 or whatever, but many of them did have names as well. These are amazing.
That's for a question.
Yes.
You are telling us that they got paid?
They got paid and they left records. And look at this, Corps d'Afrique. Now, anybody from Louisiana knows that the early regiments of the USCTs out of Louisiana were originally called Corps d'Afrique, meaning the African Corps. They had a hospital. And you know, the social norms of the day would not have had white women tending to Black men who were sick with disease or wounded or what have you. These are the women who worked in those hospitals. Look how many women worked. Now, of course, they were not all nurses. Many were cooks, many were laundresses, and so on. But it's absolutely amazing.
I'm thrilled. And so my question is, you're telling us this is at the National Archives.
Yes.
So, and besides your talks and blogs, and I'll come back to what, a little bit of what Joyceann and True was saying also. So basically you uncovered this, that you're digging and it's like, wait, what is this? So the question up, and again, we're talking about Black women. So my question to you, and also coming back to Joyceann and True, are we talking about all free women that were these nurses and cooks and what? Because all of you knew somebody or read about something. So were they only free women that were in these roles?
Many that I have found were self-emancipated women. They had gotten to the Union line on their own. Master's gone, and Missy can't
Change
keep
their
me back.
names,
Okay.
change their names, and they are free as far as that's concerned. We have Josie asking to talk. She's on a phone call.
Yeah, Josie, we'll address that. Yeah.
Is my speaker working?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I think what you found is good, but I'm here in Beaufort in the Sea Islands, and this is the area that was first liberated in the Civil War, like 10 or 11 months into the Civil War, where the 1st and 2nd colored troops were formed. That later became, I think you said it was the 30th or something like that.
33rd and the 34th. Yes.
Okay, it was renamed. Anyhow, the one thing I know is there are a couple people you mentioned, Harriet Tubman and also Susie King Taylor. They were here. I know that Harriet Tubman was not paid as a nurse for all of her service here. She was here for 3 years.
Yeah.
What she was paid for was being a widow.
A widow. That is correct. That is correct.
And with Susie King Taylor, she was actually here most of the time as a teacher and teaching people to she came here when she was 15. And she did follow the troops for a while, but generally she was helping out in a variety of ways. And the one big thing was teaching reading.
Yes, she was an educator. That is true.
So
Absolutely.
that was just my 2 cents. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so I want to follow up because I want people to make sure they go away with information. I heard National Archives. And Truann, if you're going to research women in the Civil War, where would you go? Angela said National Archives. Where else? And I'm coming to you, Joyceann, with the same question. And so where would you go, Joyceann? I'm sorry, Truann. I got 2 hands.
I would probably do what Angela is doing, is going at NARA, but there's so many other things, like, I guess your family search. I know in my hometown of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, we have the National Civil War Museum there, and there's information there and displays and things of that sort for women in the Black women in the Civil War, because that we're so close to Gettysburg and what actually happened in Harrisburg. So
good points on that. So that's also means look local and
Yes.
locally.
Okay.
That's what I was trying to say.
about the museum and this, that, and other, you're thinking about what might be there. So a museum is definitely.
Am I still on speaker? I found out
Yes,
through
let us finish here with the group, and let me get with Joyceann and Josie, go ahead and put it in the chat and we can read it out for you. and stuff. But let me get to the guest here for Joyceann. Where would you go? And
Okay,
again,
well,
state
where I have gone
every-
in the past and continue to do is when I was up in Virginia with you, I was able to get around more, and we went to the courthouse and we went to churches and found our things, and we went into graveyards and found an enormous plethora of information. And now I find myself spend a lot of time in Fold 3,
Mhm.
which is
Yes.
about the military and Indians.
Yes.
And it's how I found out I'm Muskogee Indian. And I was able to make it all the way to my great grandmother, who is buried there in Oklahoma. So the newspaper, there's a newspapers.com, there's genealogy.com. There's so many resources on the internet. The our Black history, isn't that on
Our Black
Facebook?
Yes.
Yeah, on Facebook is where
Oh,
Shelley, me, Monique, and a bunch of others all got together and found out how we belong to Charlestown. That's a whole lot of good information there coming out of people talking. I found out through their people who helped me, helped me find my great uncle, who was the first principal of Bluefield College
oh,
in
West Virginia.
Bluefield, West Virginia. So
Mhm.
it's great stuff.
Right.
Say
real-
something, Angela?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, and I think you mentioned it already, but I want to just share one image with you because you mentioned about the value of going to visit some of the cemeteries and the burial grounds, and regarding even Black women who served, some of the stories we can find that come to us from the soil. This is a headstone of Adeline Williams. As you can see on her headstone, nurse, Civil War, and the years in which she lived. And even an article from Nebraska referring to her when she passed away. She was 76 years of age. Mrs. Williams was quite a character, well known as an Army nurse during the Civil War. So, that's another place to go and look.
Do you know what part of Nebraska she was from?
I'm sorry?
Do you know what part of Nebraska she was from?
No, but I can find that out for you.
I'd appreciate that.
Okay. Oh, that's right. You all are Nebraska.
I'm all over Nebraska, so I'm saying, how come I don't know about her?
She's one of your ancestors, she's
Well, I'm not recognizing the name, but you never know. But Angela, I'm throwing something back to you and well, True Ann as well. So we know that after the Civil War, the military was overseeing these field offices.
Yes.
Is that another place to seek out those field offices and information? Because we know the archives, we're going to the public libraries, we're going to the historical societies, we're going to the graveyard, hearing the voices from the ground, like you said. And don't forget, Google is your friend.
It's your friend.
It
And
really is.
Absolutely.
It's got archives. So start asking questions. But between the two of you, that special, which is my favorite talk all the time, is about the entity that was put in place. Because I'm going to say this or ask the question, can we find records about women in the Civil War in the Bureau, the Freedmen's Bureau?
Oh, absolutely. Because one component of the Bureau, they're the schools, the Freedmen schools. And you're going to find not only women as teachers as one might expect, but you're going to find some women, adult women, as learners who are learning how to read, who wanted to be able to gain some literacy as well. There are the Freedmen Bureau that also had hospitals as well. And so absolutely, the Freedmen's Bureau is another huge record set where you can find a lot more about people. And also, again, looking at the community, I do Oklahoma a lot. So, of course, read some of those records from the freedmen of the 5 tribes and study the women. I'm finding a few more women from Indian Territory who were also of service during the war, civilian workers, civilian employees. So
Hey,
absolutely.
Angela, this is Joyceann.
Yes.
I got a quick question, if it's okay, Shelley.
Sure, go ahead, and then I'll go to True, and then I
Yeah.
want to read Josie's question in the chat.
Okay. The question is about the book on NARA on NARA site that you were talking about. Folks want to know the name, so can you put that in the chat?
Okay, let me just
And
go and
then
find it, and I'll just
It's
put it up.
Fold 3, the same
That particular ledger is not on Fold 3.
Okay.
The one that the NARA website has, it's scanned fully in color. And let me get a copy of it so you can see what it is called. Let me see. I'll zoom in on it. Okay. And I will share my screen. So,
Okay.
oops, let me find the right. Oh, I just need the green button there. Okay. And I'll share the screen. And as you can see, slideshow from the current slide. That
You're
way.
Resource.
So it is called, and in fact, I've typed it at the top. Okay, it should be names of female nurses, cooks, and laundresses employed in Army hospitals during the Civil War. This is what the ledger looks like, but on the thumbnail, when you get to the side, and you just if you copy that and drop that title into Google, it'll take you to the NARA site.
Right to,
Google is your friend. So and each
that's
one
what I
of
see
these
all the time.
Yeah,
thumbnails
it works.
is a
The
page.
link works.
Okay, great.
Keep it
Great.
that. And
So,
Thank
True
you.
Ann, coming back. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have something, Joyceann?
No, I just said thank you.
Oh, okay.
you're welcome.
And so True Ann comments on the records and resources and what I was talking about. And then I want to read what Josie had said in the chat.
Okay, that's fine. I was just, like I said, I'm from my hometown is in Harrisburg, and I know, like Angela was saying, from the soil, and we have 2 cemetery run by 2 Black women in my hometown, getting these Civil War cemeteries, restored and preserved. They have been doing amazing and long time, work. They're doing this for the long haul. So I enjoyed that photo that Angela showed us about the headstone and the lady in Nebraska, and I'll go back and look at that later.
Adeline Williams, yes.
Yes. So my other thing is, because I'm sure Angela can speak more on this because she's more experienced, and you too, Shelley. Have we thought about what goes down in the Southern Claims Commission?
Oh, another record set we didn't even mention.
Because I do follow that and look at those images, to trace my family and what was going on with them, with their, previous slave owner, and how they were moving from place to place and describing about what was going on during the war and how they were scared. Because mostly with my family being in Alabama, they stayed back with the women, the enslaved, the babies. The men more times than often went off in that little part of Alabama where I'm from. But I did find those Southern Commission claims useful for me. So if they're doing that, what's in there about the women? What would we be finding in there about that time period about the
Well,
women?
I'll simply say that I do have an ancestor, Amanda, the one who saw the stars fall, and the one I talk about a lot. She was the only claimant from Tippah County whose claim was approved. She had lost, I guess, I'm not sure which army it was that had taken her mule, but there was a mule she was allowed to ride throughout the neighborhood where she would distribute eggs. And everybody knew this is Mandy's mule. And so if people corroborated that fact that, yeah, they took a mule and she was compensated for the loss of her mule. And there were others, white male claimants, whose claims were not honored. Her claim was honored, the only one in Tippah County, Mississippi. So
for the audience, if you're not familiar with the Southern Claims Commission, basically it's where people could go file a claim to the government to get reimbursed for supplies, mule or whatever
And they're slaves.
slave that were taken for the benefit of the Union Army and so forth. So they would have to bring proof. And the St. Louis Library, I want to say St. Louis Public
in
Library,
St. Louis County Public, yes.
St. Louis County Public Library has an excellent component about the Southern claims. And what's interesting, you can also, you're hearing voices of people that were enslaved during that time. They could be witnesses and part of that. So true. Thank you for bringing that resource up. And I want to comment on Josie's comment when we were talking about records and resources. She said, I found out about Harriet Tubman and Susie King Taylor through local records held on Hilton Head, South Carolina, in the archives there. So the federal encampment at Port Royal Sound was in the Hilton Head, Beaufort.
Wow.
So again, gotta go local. And you know, I sing that tune all the time and things, and we're coming up on the end here. And I think we've shared a lot of resources, and I'm gonna check with before the last question. And Josie also talked about the free, she's got a comment in the chat for folks to see the Freedmen's Bureau. And one of the big significant things about the Freedmen's Bureau, so I'm going to sing this little tune, is you're looking at field office records. I want you to step and go find the assistant commissioner records, because they're different.
That's right.
And all of these other commissioners report to that assistant, and then that goes to headquarters.
The headquarters.
So, and they're different records. So don't just view the field office records. You got a whole nother level, and you're thinking about the military. And you know there's an organizational chart to the military. And one last thing, Black Pearls of Genealogy's website has the assistant commissioner descriptive pamphlets on it. There's even a separate descriptive pamphlet like in the regular bureau. So I want to check in with Darius. Are there any questions that you see in the chat that were not covered? And then I want to know if Brian has any from the conference room.
He's muted.
You're muted.
By looking at the chat, it seemed like all of the questions were answered.
Okay.
And we had a no-show inside the conference room, so we don't have any questions.
Okay, great. And Josie, any last comments from you before I go back to the panel? And thank you for providing some input on here. We appreciate that.
I give a plug. I have a book coming out about all the things I've discussed in this summer. It is about the first part of the Civil War as it occurred in Charleston and Port Royal Sound, and it will cover Hilton Head and the liberation of this area, the reading of the Emancipation Proclamation here, the only place in the entire country where the formerly enslaved were already liberated, and it will go up through Harriet Tubman's Combahee River Raid.
Absolutely. And she's also a local author on Gullah Geechee, and I have her book. So, and she was one of our volunteers, and then she had to finish that book.
Yeah.
Yes. So anyway, appreciate it. If you will put, I would put your, you put information put your website or your blog or email or something that if people want more information about your book coming up. And I
Okay.
do want to comment that Raina said, does Fold 3 have the same records as Nara, or should I check them both? Nara is mama, Fold 3 is daughter.
And
Now,
daughter has some records that you won't find any other place.
exactly. Yes.
Military intelligence, look up Negro subversion records. Amazing.
Amazing.
That's all I'm going to say.
I do want to say one thing. Fold 3 is a paid site.
Yes.
Sometimes, well, you can get an Ancestry all access membership, which includes Fold 3 is another thing. And for Darius, and we're talking about Civil War, Darius, if you come back on camera, and I want to congratulate you on, you got to come back on camera. Congratulate you on your new release because, well, hello there, Grant. New release on your book, At the Feet of the Elders. And if you will put information about your book into the chat so people will be able to see that. And he basically, remember his folks, that's why he knows about that 33rd. And I'll say that. And you had how many U.S. colored troops in your family? How many was it that you were researching?
It's over 25 and counting.
Wow.
Yes.
So I
again,
love it. Wow.
Great resource.
Fantastic.
And a book that we want to share about that. And he is giving some talks, and there is an upcoming webinar coming up in a couple months where him and a couple other authors will all be on talking about their books and about the writing and some skills. So thank you, Vicki McGill, for sharing the link to At the Feet of the Elders and his journey through doing the research. I want to thank everybody from coming, and I'm going to give everybody one last chance to say a takeaway you would recommend to the people listening to this, as far as if they were researching women around the Civil War. What is the one thing you would like them to either go look at or start talking about? Just something that they can walk away. And actually, I'm going to throw that to Darius first because he's still on screen. And then I'll go to Truann, Angela, and Joyceann. What is your one takeaway about researching around women in the Civil War?
I will say one takeaway is always be prepared that you don't find the documentation immediately. Sometimes it takes time to find that information.
That's good. And the name of your book?
Oh, it's called At the Feet of the Elders, A Journey into a Low Country Family History.
That's the takeaway. The elders in your family that are still with you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right there. Truann, your takeaway. What would you like to share as one takeaway?
I think that I'm just gonna make a statement from the eyes of a veteran. That's how I can sum this all up in my head, that these women were not really looking to be sheroes or heroes, right? They're here exclaiming and living out loud about their personhood. They went through all of this. And then when you come to me, my generation, and then every Veterans Day, I'm thinking about, second lieutenants and Lori Pitsua and Shoshana Johnson, that was a prisoner of war. These are Black females that served in the military, and how far we've come with all of that. And just their commitment to their roles. Mm-hmm. It's all about the paving the way for me with them. We've just come a long way. They're like our foremothers. They laid the path down for my generation and on. There's still a lot that we have to do today, but they set the blueprint, that women are just as equal, you know. I think I took that, all of this, you know, with me now, and how are we going to leave this better for the next generation? Because I'm sure they had that on their minds too, and I just wonder how they would see us now for all the sacrifices and dedication that they did, improving their worth. You know, they had to prove their worth, their humanity through all of this. And
And
here we
fight
are.
negative from the get,
Yeah,
just
but
woman and the color,
yeah,
you know.
but here we are now, you know. I've had my own child. He's a 10-year veteran, served 2 tours. You know, how he looked upon his own mommy, his mom, you know.
Sure.
Uh, So I just enjoyed it, and I thank Darius and the International African American Museum for being here today. And uh, you don't have to look any further. You can just look at these women that Angela talked to us about, Susie and, you know, Harriet and Cathay Williams. You know, you can always go back and look.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Angela?
Well, one of the things I think that occurs to me just listening as well, and I appreciate True for addressing even the women in recent years. You know, we followed the saga of Shoshana until she was released, and we were all there, you know, saying our prayers for her safe return. And to look at even the courage it took for her to come out and still have a degree of sanity after that experience. And I look at the Civil War era and look at women who came out of trauma. And some of the women not only served as helpers or in a world or in a work in which they served others, but some became really courageous women. Some started their own businesses. One woman I know started making aprons out of discarded materials. As some of the tents were torn and tattered, she would take them and wash them and turn them into work aprons that could be used by other women. And I'm looking at the fact that they dared to think beyond what they had been exposed to prior to the war. And so the fact is that we as genealogists, sometimes it's not always about our own family, because if you zoom into the community, you're going to find your family in it. We're storytellers. We've got to find those stories and tell them. These are women of courage, and let us go and find some more of their stories.
And we got to continue telling that story.
Absolutely.
And again, even when we started off with Joyceann and she mentioned Nebraska, I had to make that statement because I've been in the audience and I sat there and actually was listening to her sister when she was
Vija, yes.
there, and she had mentioned about blacks being in Cherry or Valentine, Nebraska.
Yeah.
And I knew that city, that name. And
wow.
Yes, there were blacks there. And that's how we actually connected, because I heard that and I just saw it on a document. And then, of course, years later, it's got to be 10 or 15 years now. I've been in Virginia 20. So just that connection from hearing being exposed opened that door, you know, for me to think, wait a minute, I got to get past Virginia. I got to get past Alabama, Mississippi, past Arkansas. Let me get and find out what's going on. And then the research that I know she did. And I think of the Nebraska. Yes, there were black folks there. So Joyce, what's your takeaway as far as researching women or around the Civil War? What would be your one takeaway?
Well, I wish I I hadn't thought about it earlier, but in the book that I wrote of Proofing the Claim, I made a point of doing a write-up on the women that proofed their claim and were able to, you know, successfully get land. And in the all white cemetery in Brownlee, Nebraska, you had Mrs. Robinson
Mm,
was a farmer, owned her own land,
mm.
and they buried her there. And our grandfather, William Walker, is buried there as well. My takeaway is that I hear so much about Harriet Tubman, that it saddens me that she's the only one I'm hearing about.
Yes.
So my mission of late is to go find stories about other women and celebrate them. You know, it's complacent,
Mhm.
and I did this for my granddaughter. It's complacent to grab her name and use her as a project. I said, you need to find somebody that the world doesn't know about.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we went about and we found somebody. And we found her great grandmother. So, and that's Nebraska. She was a Rosie Riveter,
Uh-huh.
and
Right.
during the Second World War, she gathered the forces that make sure that the soldiers were fed.
Mhm.
So
Perfect
and
segue for next Saturday.
I'm sorry.
I said that's a perfect, thank you for that, but perfect segue.
Yeah.
And you'll hear in a moment why I'm saying that. So finish your thought on that.
Yeah. So my project that I'm working on, not only is it my own story, but it's a story to try and find, it's the research to try and find women that have not been recognized. Yes, you have the tombstones, so we're getting words from the ground.
Mhm.
But also, if we take these people and I think it's Angela is doing, you do a tree of those people's families, and you'll find the descendants,
Mhm.
and maybe they might have some information or a story to tell you.
We'll find your
So
family.
it's to me, it's more exciting to do the research and
Mhm.
form that tree and then get the apples from the tree.
Absolutely.
So that's another way of looking at how are we going about acknowledging our ancestors.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mhm.
And the biggest takeaway for me is that the women were there. I know we're talking about Civil War, and I'm going to make a
Yeah.
comment and thank everybody for coming. But again, Revolutionary War, just so y'all know, the people during that time, runaway slaves and etc., there were more women running, escaping slavery than men.
Okay.
And not only were they running by themselves, they had their babies with them. They were
Wow.
pregnant. They were dressing up like
Yeah.
soldiers and fighting in the war. And again, a thing for the audience, go look up and read about Nancy Ward, and I'll leave it there. She's the Native American one, but learn about Nancy Ward and think about what you're going to find out about her. So again, I appreciate y'all and your time today. I think there was a lot of information given out, and I hope the audience, there's great comments in the chat if y'all want to see. Folks, you can save the chat. Don't forget, next Saturday is the last Saturday of Black History Month. And please come back and register, because it will talk about the whole theme that we've had has been military and African Americans. And the last session of the month on the 24th at 1 p.m. will be about World War I and World War II, the men and women, African American men and women during that time. And of course, you will get records, resources, tips, and as you heard today, somewhat experience of what they went through as, I'm going to say, the modern day veteran and being women. So thank you all for coming. Appreciate your time. And hopefully you'll get to visit the museum in the next few months and have a chance to stroll through the 9 galleries that are there. Visit the Center for Family History. Brian Sheffey is there in the museum. He's the director of the Center for Family History, another great resource. Make sure you tune in tomorrow at 4 o'clock for Genealogy Adventures, when Brian Sheffey and Danya Williams will be talking about Carter Woodson with a guest. So anyway, have a great day.